start of the pandemic, many people praised Dr. Zweli Mkhize for his handling, for the way that he spoke to the nation, for the way he explained things. Wow, how his political star has fallen so low today.
Good afternoon, Stephen. Good afternoon to the viewers. Indeed, I think the fact of the matter is Dr. Zweli Mkhize was the guy. He was the guy that was on the ground. He was amenable. He was accessible. He was talking to media. He was talking more to the media about the pandemic than the president was. The president used to have family gatherings or family meetings, never had the Q&A with the media. He was the guy that was seen hitting the ground running on this. And I think for some of us, for me personally, I thought this couldn't be possible. This guy is a nice guy, and he seems to be genuinely engaged in his portfolio. He seems to genuinely take his office and the oath of his office seriously. And boom, look at this now. His entire his entire credibility has been shot by this SIU report. But he's not necessarily being implicated in the way that perhaps he has himself decided, I will resign. Because again, the challenge here is how much did he influence this whole process?
Well, this comes also to the politics of the ANC and a much bigger question. Is this the end of Mkhize's political career? Some people think he nearly became president after Nasrec. It didn't happen. He did try and run a campaign. But is this the end of Zweli Mkhize, do you think? Or was it too early to say?
I wouldn't want to speculate on that, Stephen, because we think that these kinds of scandals and these kinds of legitimacy crises and credibility crises will have an impact on people. But not just in South Africa, the world over, people seem to brush it off and think that they've done no wrong. I would like to think that perhaps consciousness and somebody's prevailing conscience will come out here and say, you know what, I've been caught in the scandal, I've been implicated in it, I don't think I have a political career after this, and I should just go away quietly. But unfortunately, we live in very unprecedented times where people feel that they're unaccountable, that they feel that what they've done has not been any wrongdoing. And I think this is where, looking at the recommendations, looking at what the president has, what the spokesperson of in the presidency has said now, that departments and institutions will have to start applying their minds in terms of how they take this forward with regard to what kind of action they're going to take, I think is going to be very important. But the real question here is how many more other people will face criminal charges apart from the former acting DG?
We're in the middle of an election campaign, a local government election campaign. Sometimes we can forget that, but Sanusha, I think only for about 30 seconds at a time are we able to forget that. What impact does this have? You have a pandemic, you have people dying in the second wave, and you had someone, at a Gucci store in Sandton spending 90,000 rand. Does this have an impact on the ANC during the campaign?
I think it does. I think people are not as blinded or have blinkers on when it comes to what is happening on the ground. When we looked at the election manifestos, when you looked at the launches, particularly the launch of the ANC, promising to do better, people are living in absolute undignified circumstances. The sewer issue in the Western Cape, in Khayelitsha, the fact that people don't have decent housing, they're still fighting for decent jobs, decent livelihoods, and decent lives. They don't necessarily need to be told, oh, give us another chance. People know their circumstances. They know what they're living in. And I think at the end of the day, this does not bode well for the ANC. In other countries, when you have scandal upon scandal and you don't see the accountability, in some countries, the governments resign.
Well, this brings us to the next question, which is that President Ramaphosa, there's a difference between, I would suggest, there's a difference between this scandal and what we saw at the Zondo Commission. And the difference is that after the Zondo Commission has focused on things that happened before President Ramaphosa proclaimed that the ANC was going to renew itself, the new dawn that we used to hear so much about. This happened after the new dawn, after what we were told was the process of the ANC renewing itself. And then to add the sort of cherry on top of that particular cake is that the president allowed Mkhize to resign. He didn't just fire him. What do we learn from that?
What kind of signals does that send to the electorate and to you and I and to investors and everybody? Are you just going to say, I'm taking this careful, cautious approach, I'm always consulting, I leave it up to you to do the right thing. But I think it doesn't necessarily bode well for the Cyril Ramaphosa presidency. I mean, at times I do feel that it's such a difficult presidency to manage, given everything that's happening around in terms of structural issues and having scandals, etc. But this is one of the bigger scandals under his presidency, and I think this is going to be one of those that he can't necessarily navigate away from. And so, what it says about his kind of trying to deal with the issues is that as much as he's trying to, he just doesn't have the trust of his cabinet, the trust of his party, but also at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the waning trust of the electorate in the party. And of course, we'll have to see how this impacts on his presidency and the election. And I think at the end of the day, there's another example of how South Africans have betrayed by corruption and rent-seeking behavior.
Sanusha, if we sort of put a different spin on it, and if I were to act for a moment as a, I don't know, an attorney for the president, and I'm not going to do that, but let me just sort of make this point. Could the argument also go that what we might be seeing is more accountability in South Africa? This started, we shouldn't forget, this started from a media report. And after the media report, we started to see the SIU investigate. And that led to the consequence of Mkhize eventually leaving, of where we are now. I mean, the fact that the media reports and there are severe consequences, that must tell us something.
Well, it tells you that the media is still a very vibrant, independent fourth estate in South Africa, and still very much a critical actor in exposing this. I mean, I would like to think that if the media was not there and they didn't start this investigative report and they started to expose what was happening with this deal, what was going on with our institutions? Why weren't our institutions creating the kind of oversight role, etc.? It says in the report that the oversight role in terms of accountability and what was happening, that was dropped in terms of the department and the minister. So I think at the end of the day media is really keeping the ball rolling here. And if this is where we're extrapolating and this is where investigations are becoming are leading to from media reports, then we have to ask the question, what's happening in these institutions? Hopefully, what happens now going forward with the SIU report and what happens in terms of further investigations by the MPA and, of course, what the recommendations come out from the Zondo Commission helps to strengthen the investigative oversight powers of these institutions. But it can't always be that you follow what media is doing. You've got to have these institutions strengthened and doing what they are supposed to be doing.
Sanusha Naidu, thanks very much indeed, the political analyst. Well, so many consequences, of course, stemming from digital vibes. Do appreciate the time.